challenge.
It is 1:30, but we're just going to wait a second to get the technology set up before we call the meeting to order. Are we good when it comes to people in here, or are we? Okay, all right. All right, welcome everybody. It is 1:33 on Thursday, April 23rd, 2020, and we have our Wausau Waterworks Commission meeting right now. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from the March 3rd, 2020 meeting. What is the pleasure of this body? We have a motion by Jean,
Yes, thank you.
Herbst will second.
second by Herbst. All those in favor can signify by saying aye.
I have some questions.
Oh, all right.
Eric, on or Dave, I guess you're over there, the landfill leachate, in the minutes, we talked about a 6-month timeframe. Has that started yet? Are we taking leachate?
I don't know if you can hear me from this. We haven't started yet.
Have not started.
Starting on May 1st.
May 1, thank you.
Initially, I thought it was going to be.
Okay. And also, Eric, we were going to get, at some point, Ehlers to look at this residential-commercial water rate split. Is anything taking place on that?
Yeah, I have been talking with Brian Romer with Ehlers, and they are working on that along with, they're trying to finalize the sewer rates too, proposal moving forward. So
So we'll see something maybe at the next meeting?
Yeah, maybe at the next meeting, depending on when that next meeting is. If it's really soon, then it might be the following.
Okay. And then the final thing is, we had talked about when we give out the bottles of Northwoods Mist, the water to charitable organizations, there was some concern about the plastic bottles becoming litter, not being properly recycled. Are we going to, do we have a plan for trying to enforce that? I know it's difficult, but it had occurred to me that we could tell an organization who's accepting that water that we require them to give us a written statement as to how they're recycling the bottles. And if they don't do that, or they don't recycle the bottles, that we do not give them water in the future. I don't know if we've made any progress on that, Scott.
I have not, Jim. We were looking into having just a sheet, a statement that needed to be signed
By them?
by them, certifying that they would have the bottles recycled.
Okay, and maybe the language could say, you know, we won't give you free water in the future if you don't recycle these bottles.
I agree. I think
Okay.
it's a good idea. I haven't followed up on it with the COVID and everything else that's going on. We're not
Sure.
giving any out, and nobody's doing
Well, that's right.
any events right
Yeah,
now.
no
so
events coming up.
it hasn't
Exactly.
been pressed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Okay, are there any other comments on the minutes? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes unanimously. All right, we're moving on to our director's report. I'm going to pass the mic over to Eric.
Yeah, so there's quite a few items, so as usual, if any of the commissioners have questions on any of those items, you know, myself, Dave, or Scott are more than happy to clarify or answer those questions.
Yes, Commissioner Jean.
I got a question about the, and not actually a question, I think I could offer some input with regard to the I&I study, and I think it was indicated to me that there's a scope of work being prepared, and I'd be happy to offer my input in areas that I think might need some attention by our consultant.
Yeah, that'd be very beneficial for us, Joe, and I appreciate that. We'll share that scope of services with you once we get it, and actually with all the commissioners, I will.
All right.
And
Thank
yeah,
you.
Thank you.
I had a comment. On the Thomas Street siphon project, there was some minor discussion on Facebook this morning about a citizen asking what was going on there. I drove down before the meeting. Obviously, we've taken quite a bit of trees out on both sides of the river, and there's some digging going on. Could we post a sign explaining what that project is?
We could look at preparing a sign, yeah. So do you want it like right on top there by the social services building?
Yeah, I would say
or-
by the social services
Okay.
building parking lot there, so that,
Yep,
you know, people know what's going on.
I can do that, Jim.
Okay.
Supervisor Jean?
Just so that everybody remembers, the purpose of replacing that line is to minimize or to avoid the event that we had a couple years ago. So I think you remember that, Jim, so just so that everybody remembers, that's why we're doing that. And in fact, we're going to do the other one that parallels Thomas Street Bridge too. Dave might want, or I'd like Dave to speak briefly about the vacancies and the process that we're going through to fill vacancies down at the wastewater.
Sure. Yeah, you just need to use the mic. Thank you.
So Dave Erickson, wastewater superintendent. And we've, for various reasons, got quite a few empty positions at the wastewater plant. 2 of them are new positions that we added. I think they were fully justified, and we need to get those filled. We've had some retirements and a couple other people that have left for different reasons. And so we're down to the point where we have 6 open positions where we're authorized to have 14, so it's nearly half. And some of them are key positions. We've lost a lot of experience with some of the guys that have left. And so there's been issues with getting the process in place for interviewing and hiring employees, but I'm very strongly pushing to get those positions filled. We could easily, with this COVID issue, have people that are out because they're on quarantine or because they maybe have family members that need their attention. And we're down to below minimum staff levels now. And so I'm pushing for the HR department to let us do whatever, come up with a process and get those positions filled, and would appreciate you guys helping me push that ahead.
So in other words, they haven't even advertised for fill?
Oh, no, we've advertised for all of those.
Okay.
For all of the positions, not all of the vacancies. So we've advertised for one maintenance sewer collection person, and, but we actually now are up to 3 vacancies. So we've got some interviews to complete, and we could maybe fill one, maybe we'd fill one position out of this pool and then advertise for the other 2 positions.
Are you getting applicants, Dave?
Yeah, it seemed to me that we, as this issue has progressed with the economy and whatnot, that the number of applicants has increased. And so we have, well, especially with the most recent postings, we have quite a few applicants.
This doesn't relate to the current situation, but I'm aware that filling positions in the clean water profession across the country is a problem. And do we ever have any plans to go to some of these career fairs at the Tech or even at the university? Stevens Point, for example? Is it something we should look at down the road?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a select market that we're looking for. We could, I'm open for any ideas to get the most qualified candidates that we can.
Okay.
But I think like making sure that like University of Wisconsin at Stevens Point has a program that's very good for wastewater.
Yes, they do.
And make sure that they're aware of it, but they monitor job openings. And so, yeah, we'd be looking for
Well, I think
candidates,
I
but
think
also some with experience, so,
Yeah. All right.
okay.
With the lab vacancy,
Yeah.
have you had any success filling that position?
We did start the interview process, telephone interviews. We interviewed some this morning and some tomorrow.
Okay.
And we've got some very good candidates. And also, we've got a couple of interns that have been with us, Emily especially, for a period of time. And she's doing an excellent job of filling in. But she'll be leaving by the end of May. So,
Thank you.
Mayor and Eric, just one other observation. The proposed solar generation project, well, you haven't gotten to that yet, have you? No. Well, that's on your list, so I could address that. One of my concerns is, it's not a serious concern, but it's just an observation, is whenever we evaluate solar or some other alternative energy project, we usually shoot it down because it's not cost effective. So I saw the observation on this solar at the water plant being a 10-year payback. Somehow we ought to factor in the green aspect of it. Yeah, it's not going to pay back in 3 years, but it's a green project and it's going to reduce our consumption of fossil fuels and might also serve as an example to the community that there are green alternatives that are available and feasible. So I would just like us to keep that in mind when we evaluate green projects.
I agree. I think we can have some criteria where that is a priority for us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the director's report that we should go through? I want to make sure Commissioner Miller also has an opportunity if he wants to speak. All right, then we'll move on to the next agenda item, discussion and possible action on applying for private side lead service line forgivable loans. I'm going to turn that over to you.
So the state of Wisconsin has, or is going to be receiving some additional funds for the private side lead service line replacement program. And this is really just notifying you that that is coming, and we'll be applying, or we're open to apply for that this fall. And so, but we need to get started for this year because we're going to need to show exactly which ones we're replacing. And so some of our concepts will be coming back to the commission for review as we work through this year. So we are early in the process, but I wanted commissioners to know that it's here, and for your support would be great to move this forward.
Certainly support it. I noticed that approximately 60 million is being allocated toward it, plus about 26 or up to 26 million that's left over from previous efforts. that's let's say $85 million, and it's $5,000 allocated for one line replacement?
Is that what we were, the commission allocated $3,000.
Okay.
Yep, for each one.
Well, at 5,000, I just did the math, that's 17,000 line replacements for the state of Wisconsin, right? Mm-hmm. Well, that ain't very many, so let's get in line and identify specifically the lines that we want to replace and make a good case for it. I know you will.
Do we need a motion to pursue further?
I think it would be helpful if the commissioners voted on that to move it forward.
I would move that we, as quickly as we can and as specifically as we can be, we apply for a portion of that funding.
Do I have a second? Second by Jean. Any further discussion? Yes, Jean.
The issue with I think we have to, is it mandatory that we have the replacement ordinance? Is it mandatory to have that in place?
No.
No, not at this time and not for this program.
Because I was afraid that if we did do that, and then with the money dries up, it's not going to go over very well.
Right.
So we don't have to do that. As I was reading it, it looked like we didn't have to, and I just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Okay. Any other further discussion, or are we ready to vote? All right. All those in favor of applying for a private side-led service line forgivable loans can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. That passes unanimously. Moving on is discussion item 4, discussion on establishing a mandatory private side-led lateral replacement ordinance. I will turn that over to you, Eric.
So this, Joe, he just had talked about this. So obviously, it's heavily encouraged by the DNR to implement an ordinance, and we've talked about one in the past when the replacement funding had come up in the past. So I wanted to put this on as a discussion item to see if there's any appetite from the commission to take a look at this. We could bring examples of other communities. We could, have a discussion on whether this, after you have a chance to take a look at those, on whether it's something that the commission would want to promote. We have had very little success in getting people to voluntarily replace their line. I bet you it's been 10 to 12% of each of our large projects on the private side. Would you say that's right, Scott? It's been pretty low.
Without the subsidized funding, it's been less than 1%.
Yeah.
Even with the funding at $3,000 per service, we're about 40% in the last 3 years of people that have eligible lead lines as to those who accept the funding.
And so when we look at that, and of course, we want to be methodical on how we replace those lines rather than just sporadic throughout the city. So, and the commission did approve, kind of a priority list on how we're going to do that, and we're following that. But I wanted to put this on. I don't know if you, the commissioners, want to put some thought into this over time, and then we could revisit this, as we move forward. But, and then also maybe some other options on how we get more residents to be more proactive on this. I mean, we truly have to get this lead out of the ground, off of our water system.
Right, no question. I do worry about the word mandatory. We're going to be asking people to pay more for their water, wastewater service here pretty soon. I'm not sure that a mandatory lateral replacement ordinance would go over very well, but we need to do something to encourage people to do this. I would move we table this to the next meeting and have some examples perhaps from other communities brought in so that we could see what others are doing to have more success at this enterprise.
Okay. Thank you.
Move to table, Mayor.
All right.
I'll second that, but I've got some other comments. Just for clarification, so people that are watching this at a later time, I think the utility has done a great job of at least replacing their side. I think is it fair to say that we're probably 50% complete, Scott, with our side? And I don't think a lot of people understand that there's publicly owned portion, and then from the property line into the house is private, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, we should be over half of our laterals completed into copper.
So,
Can I just have you restate your motion?
My motion was to table this discussion until the next meeting and have staff bring us some examples of what other communities are doing with respect to ordinances regarding lead removal.
Okay. Okay. I have request for
There's a
comment. from the-
second here.
Yep. I have request for comment from the audience, right here.
Hi, Deborah Ryan, 702 Elm Street. Dennis Smith had mentioned to me about the lead lateral. I believe it's been like 4 years ago. And it happens, I was renting my house and living in Madison when the Elm Street was done back in 2007, I believe. And at the time, I was talking long distance to Waterworks staff, and they had told me my water lateral was on 7th Avenue, so I didn't have to worry about that. And then later on, I moved back in 2009 and realized, no, it's on Elm. So I have brought up in previous discussions, and I guess I am quite vocal with my residents, and having been a HUD housing counselor, that this is a freebie. But you've pretty much gone with the priorities of bigger business, the child care centers, and just in recent years, I'm aware of Elm Street qualifies, and had their road redone. Callan did last year. 12th Avenue had road repairs done, I think up on Maple. And if you would consider homeowners that had their, and like I know Kent as well, had their street redone. So if you would consider looking at those other homeowners that you've ignored for over 4 years, and we got the word out, I think that would change, because I think even though I had done 2 decades in grants, if you're not really getting much input, you may not qualify. And so I think we really need to encourage spending those funds and getting the word out. But so far, you've been ignoring homeowners that have had their roads redone. And at the time this was brought up on Elm Street, it was pretty poor. And you're talking about $5,000 to $10,000, and people were concerned about, how am I going to pay my assessment on my street? So I wish you would reconsider and look at those streets that were previously done and still have lead laterals at their connection. Now, for me, I'm a Berkey filter user, so everything water-wise, I filter and takes the lead out, as well as 200 contaminants. But I wish you would quit ignoring homeowners that have had their street done in the past and consider them up towards the top of the list, so that you are getting homeowners that are interested in this freebie. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there any more discussion on this? Just so you know, if you're on the phone, we have unmuted you, so please be careful. But also, Commissioner Miller, you should be able to speak to us too, if you have any comments.
Just to comment on what Deb, so Steve?
We'll go with, let's go with Steve first.
Yeah.
I've been listening, and I'm very sorry that there were technical difficulties, but I'm with you, and not by video, lucky for you. I do have a question about the lead line and the assertion that residents are being ignored. Can someone say something about that?
Yeah, I can. The residents aren't being ignored. So how in the past, when we had received the grant funding or the forgivable loan funding, how the commission had approved these to be set up was that the priority would be our street reconstruction projects. And so annually, as we had done the reconstruction projects, the idea was is that money would go further because, you know, a lot of that excavation is being done during the street project. And so, and the commission allowed up to $3,000 for a homeowner to receive in a grant. And anything above that, the homeowners would have to pay. So we advertised it. We had given mailings, multiple mailings for each of the projects. We didn't have, because we don't have a mandatory, it's all volunteer. And we didn't have a lot of involvement from the residents. But the ones that did, we walked them through the process. The second priority is previous street reconstruction projects. And we have just started talking about those just because we still have funding available that will need to be spent yet this year. And so we're starting to look at 2016 and earlier street reconstruction projects, and we will start sending out mailings to those, and we'll work backwards from 16 to 15 and so on and so forth until that money's expended. With the new money that we're proposing to apply for, we'll take that same approach because we know what services are out there. And so that's what we'll be working on as well with the new funding that will be available for '21.
Great. Thank you very much, Eric. You more than aptly answered my question, so thank you so much.
Yep.
Thank you. Jim?
Oh, Eric, would that include some of the streets that Alderman Ryan is referring to?
I'm not sure when Elm Street was redone,
Okay.
but okay, so, I mean, eventually, we'll probably get there.
Good.
So we'll work on those on a year-by-year basis.
Because my understanding, and I've been on this board about 5 years, those grant funds were available maybe 3 years ago? Not much longer back than that. 7?
2007.
I
Thank you.
don't think so.
The funding became available in 2017.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Joe?
I mean, Ms. Ryan indicated that it sounded like we didn't replace our portion either, and I find that hard to believe. In fact, I think we beefed up the pipe,
Our portion would have been replaced
I-
during the street reconstruction.
because otherwise she'd still be connected to the old pipe, I think. So it's simply on the private side. I mean, I don't mean to make it trivia, but it's not on our side. And if she wanted, and if she worked through the process, she would still have to, I think the homeowner has to initiate the activity and get it done, and then they get reimbursed, so. But I don't know where she would be in the pecking order, but
So establishing the criteria and coming back and visiting this at a later date is good for all of us. Okay. Do we have more discussion, or are we ready to vote? All right. All those in favor of tabling this discussion item for, did we have a later date identified?
Next meeting is what, May 5th?
Okay. We'll table this discussion point until the next meeting then. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm in favor of that,
Aye.
but if they don't have the information by then, it will be as soon as possible.
Okay, we
Okay.
can, all those opposed? All right, this motion passes unanimously. Moving on to discussion item number 5, discussion and possible action on installing a barrier around the Reservoir Park overflow pipe. Again, I will move it over to you.
Yeah, I know Scott had been working with Parks and stuff on this. He has a memo in the packet for you. If you have questions on that, otherwise, Scott, they'll probably let you handle this with the details.
No, I had an excerpt from July of last year. Jim had brought this to my attention initially. We put this right up in the packet at that time. And looking back, Mr. Force wasn't at that meeting, and Ms. Ryan wasn't there either. So Jim had asked that we bring this back forward, so it's open for.
Well, I think there are two issues here, Scott. I don't take any issue with your findings, and you've discussed that, and you've, I think, done a good job on that as far as the the safety issue is. My point at the last meeting, and I continue to feel this way, is that some shrubbery or plantings around that area would just add to the aesthetics, since it is in a park. And I frankly think that it's probably from an engineering standpoint, it's a very fine project. I think from a visual standpoint, it's pretty ugly. So I don't, you know, you've looked into the safety issue, and I'm satisfied with your findings. I would just like to see the park department put some plantings around it, just for aesthetics.
I can revisit that with them again. Their initial thought was that it was just going to be more of a maintenance item. We can discuss that. I can take care of that.
Well, they have people who maintain shrubs and trees.
Right.
I can tell you that. They've been cutting in my neighborhood pretty frequently lately.
Do we need a motion to move this further to direct you to talk to the Parks Department, or?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay.
Scott knows where we stand on this, I think, at least where I
Sounds good.
stand. I don't know how Joe feels.
All right. Is there any more discussion on this item, though? I don't want to. All right, moving on to item number 6, discussion and possible action for a water conservation education program to help customers offset higher water bills.
Yeah, so, Jim, you had asked about, ways that we can inform the public about ways that they can conserve water,
Right.
help them out with their bills, and there is a water education group that can help us do that and put the word out. And it's everything from lead service lines to,
Right.
water heating and everything. And so I think this is a good place to start, and if they can help us out, do that outreach, I think that would be beneficial.
I agree. There's a lot of good resources out there. We're not the first people to address this issue. It's been addressed in just about every community. I would like to see a very specific plan developed for how we're going to communicate that information to our customers. In the material that Scott presented, and I appreciate you doing the research on this, Scott, it's very good. I didn't see any reference to WaterSense appliances. And those are available at Home Depot. I don't know about Menards, or Fleet Farm, but that's another way to reduce water consumption, low flow shower heads, low flow toilets. And that might be in our materials as well.
Herbst.
Just a comment, I think this would be an ideal thing to put in our Wausau Works for You, because that reaches many, many
Right.
citizens.
Right.
That's a very good point.
Commissioner Miller, go ahead.
Yes, I'm sorry, this is very awkward because I really would like to see all, but I can't. But anyway, I just wanted to offer my opinion on the water education group materials. I think they're excellent. I had, at our last meeting, alluded to a possible PSA that would be similar to the recycling, what to recycle, what not to from Marathon County. So however it spills out into the future, no pun intended, I think it's a good start. And so thanks to Scott and to Jim for bringing this forward.
I think PSAs would be a great idea. And I have to think our local TV stations would be more than happy to carry those. They'd have to be developed, obviously, but maybe we could partner with 7 or 9 to have that done. They do have resources to devote to public service announcements, charitable causes.
Or potentially Wausau Area Access Media.
Sure, the public access.
Yeah, I just don't know about the number of viewers who see that.
No, but if they could produce it, it could be played on the,
Oh, gotcha.
the local.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm seeing public access nod, so it looks like that's a possibility.
There is another issue here that I'd like to explore, and I've started a little bit of research on it. I don't know if I know there are public funds or foundation funds available to folks who can't pay utility bills. I think on the electrical side, there are some programs that help folks do that. I don't know on the water side whether that exists or not, but I I'm interested in that, and if anyone knows of any programs, let me know, but I'm doing some research on that. In other words, a low-income person who can't afford the water rate increases, could they apply for a grant and get some help with that? I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to look into it.
Good. Do we require a motion on this, or is it strictly informational?
I think if we have the direction.
Got the
Yeah.
direct, okay.
Yeah, good.
Thank you.
All right, then we will move on to the next agenda item, number 7, discussion and possible action on approving an amendment from Clark Dietz Engineers for construction, management services related to the Industrial Park Lift Station and Force Main projects.
Yeah, so we've been working with Clark Dietz on the Industrial Park Lift Station projects, and so they had completed the design, and we're bidding right now those last 2 pump replacements, along with the additional work at the lift station, and this would be for the construction administration of those, as well as the startup and the training and other items that we need. So I would recommend that we move forward with this to keep them on board.
Yes.
Also move to approve the change order, but I have some questions about it after we get a second.
Okay, I'd like a second.
Second.
Second by Miller. All right, discussion.
What is the projected project cost? Do we know that offhand? In other words,
I don't know what the estimate is offhand for that project, Joe.
well, the only reason for asking, it seems kind of high, unless it's as needed. In other words, they may not spend all of it to do the work.
Correct, yeah, it's a time and materials really not to exceed the 49.9, but I can get you the information on the project cost and what that would be.
Because I wouldn't expect that to be $500,000.
I
Okay.
don't know, Joe, I'm sorry.
The other thing, I don't know where we are with the work to provide insertion points for the pigging of the force main. Can anybody give me an update on where that is right now? Which is associated with this? I
Dave,
know that's not what this is for.
correct, yeah, but it's part of that industrial park lift station. Yep.
Yeah, I think Clark Dietz number 3 included some of the engineering services for that force main. That is part of the cost, for the Clark Dietz part, the engineering part. The other part, we've had a couple of holdups. We've gotten most of those squared away. The agreement with the railroad's pretty much in place, so they're on board and set to go. There had been an issue with bidding documents and the language, particularly with reference to insurance. And I believe they've got that worked out now. Diane with Clark Dietz has been working with the attorney's office and the contractor on that. And then the other big thing is we wanted to make sure we had permanent easements with adjacent property owners. The work we're doing is essentially on the railroad property. That's where our line is. But to get there to make use of these insertion points, to service them or to use them when we're pigging, we would need in all 4 cases across the adjacent property owner's property. And so we want to have easements in place to do that. And I've been working with those property owners, and they've generally, we're at a point where the local guys have forwarded them to their attorneys, and we're hoping to get that resolved soon so we can get going.
At one point, we were talking about a flow of ice into the main to scour it.
Yeah.
Is that concept still being considered, or are we
I
looking
think
at pigging?
we've pretty well ruled it out. There are a couple things about it. It seemed that the scale that's on the inside of that pipe is pretty hard. Somebody referenced if you can scrape it off with your thumbnail, then the ice pigging would work well. If you can't, then you probably need something different. The other thing about it is that the ice pigging, they actually recommended more insertion points than they do with the conventional pigging operation. So in terms of getting the agreements and access and putting in those insertion points, that would be more difficult for the ice pigging.
So are we going with pigging? I didn't know, that was my question. Are we going with actual pigging
The
insertion?
insertion points are in place with the idea of doing the conventional pigging. So,
So the plans are available for us to proceed with putting those in, we just need to get access to those points. Is that fair, or?
We want to provide access for construction and for in the future as we utilize them. So we need easements with adjacent property owners.
I guess my question is, do we have the plans ready to put
Oh,
those?
yes, the plans are.
Oh, okay,
Oh, yeah.
all right. Would that be ingress, egress, a temporary limited type thing, instead of full-blown easements?
Well, we're talking about, and I don't know if the attorney's also wants to help me out, but we're talking about a permanent easement. So even in the future, they couldn't build something that would be, that would impede our access to our location, or it wouldn't do us any good. Generally, I don't think it's really a problem. It's just a matter of getting it down on paper that we've got legal access.
How much right-of-way do we have on the railroad on each side of the tracks?
There's a couple exceptions, but I'm thinking it's 100 feet total, 50 feet each side. I could be wrong on that. There's a reasonable distance, but in some places, there's not really, it's not really truck accessible. We'd have to work something out with the railroad and put it in an access road. But the adjacent property owners may have the access road immediately adjacent to the right-of-way. So then we just need to make sure we have permission to use that access road, so we aren't infringing on their property without permission.
Well, I understand that, and I respect that, but asking for an easement where, I don't know what the setback requirement would be, it might be difficult for us to get those kinds of documents. If you follow what I'm saying? Because in other words, we're encumbering their property, and they can't build something on top of that.
Generally, it's areas where currently they're using it for the same purpose, to access. And so, probably they wouldn't be building a structure that close to the railroad right-of-way anyway. But yeah, I mean, the local people seem to understand our need and be supportive, but generally there are corporations involved, and we need to get their approval and document that.
Just out of idle curiosity, what four property owners are we need to deal with?
Two of them are on the Veritas property. One of them is kind of distance from where they're actually using it. It's kind of a wetland area. There's a overhead big power cable in that vicinity. So it's just basically grass. The second one is kind of in their parking area, and the managers are generally okay with us using it as long as we don't impede the operation of their business, which we would want to work around. Then the next one up is Alter Metal Recycling, and that one, kind of the same sort of thing. The most convenient way would be to use the access road that they use. It comes in from the south off from Sherman and crosses the railroad tracks, and then follows along the north side of the railroad tracks to the point where we've identified we'd like to put in one of those access points. And then the last one is the Pro Builders, and this would be on the north side of their parking lot adjacent to the railroad tracks. And again, they've got a paved parking area. It would be the most convenient, obvious way for us to access the point. But then, again, we're crossing their property.
Which side of the tracks was that one?
Pro Builders is on the south side of the
Yep,
tracks.
okay.
North side of their parking area, south side.
Yes, okay, very good, thank you.
Is there any more discussion on this?
Joe, the cost on the lift station was $515,000. Yeah, that worked.
Okay, do we need we have a motion? Are we ready to vote? Just to restate what we're actually voting on, it is the approving an amendment for Clark Dietz Engineers for construction management services related to the industrial park, lift station, and force main projects. All those in favor can signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 8, discussion and possible action regarding transfer of warranty maintenance contract for the micro turbines from Unison Solutions to Virgin Power Solutions.
Yeah, this one's more of a ministerial paperwork situation. I think Dave can go through it real quick.
Some years ago, I think it was the 1990 expansion, does that sound right, Joe, when those microturbines were put in? No, since then.
Which date, I'm sorry?
I said 1990, but it was after that.
Yeah, it was, I think it was 2011 to 2012 when they
Okay.
put those in.
And so the microturbines burn the methane that we generate at the wastewater plant and generate electricity. And when we bought an extended services agreement and a warranty. And that warranty is from the manufacturer, which is Capstone. But they had contracted with Unison to do the maintenance on the microturbines. But that contractual arrangement has changed some. And so as a result, we would have a new contract with the, I got the wrong page up, and I don't remember the name of the business there. Virgin Power. And so the only, my understanding is our warranty is with the manufacturer, and that won't change. But the terms of the warranty period extend in January, and so I want to make sure that we get everything up to snuff as best we can, maintenance-wise, before that happens. And so that would be the only concern, is we're kind of changing businesses. But I'm satisfied, and as things are, for the time being, Unison would still be doing that work, subcontracting to Virgin. So I said it's a lot of paperwork, but it could be important if we weren't satisfied that they were continuing the maintenance, but the warranty itself is unchanged with Capstone.
Not sure we need to do anything on this, right? Do we need to approve what you're suggesting? We need to approve their change? Or need to approve that we continue with Virgin?
Well, we had a contract with Unison to do this work, and so they're proposing to change that to our contract would be with Virgin.
I move that we support the change to the new company, Virgin.
All right, we have a motion. Do I have a second? A second? I'll give it to Herbst. Any more discussion? Yes.
What is the cost annually for their services, or what has it been?
I believe we're paying approximately $20,000 a year, $5,000 per quarter. But then that includes some equipment and some upgrades as we go along here.
So you're pleased with the work that's happened with that warranty up to this point?
I'm generally pleased. There's an issue I want to work out where one of the turbines the power, the efficiency isn't quite as good as the other one. We aren't getting our 65 kilowatts out of it. And so we want to get that resolved.
Thank you.
Is there any more discussion on this item? All right, again, we are voting on the transfer of the warranty maintenance contract. All those in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same
Aye.
sign. All right, that motion passes unanimously. Moving on to item number 9, discussion and possible action on hiring a third-party consultant firm to complete an asset management operation assessment of the proposed drinking water treatment facility and the wastewater treatment facility to allow for enhancing system operations and data usage. I guess I will just point out that this was something that I requested early on, and maybe I can turn it over to Eric, and you can let us know what you found out.
Yeah, so the mayor asked me to look into this, because we're with these two new plants and what other advantages that we can have moving forward with both of these projects. And so I wasn't exactly sure how to put this together, so I had called a number of engineering firms to help me out and get some input on this. Clark Dietz is actually doing some work with other utilities related to asset management, operation assessment, those types of things. So Tanya with Clark Dietz was gracious enough to help me out and kind of summarize some of the things that they have been doing and maybe some of the, items that out of these assessments would be a benefit to the city if the commission would like to pursue or move down this avenue as we move forward. And so this is just kind of a layout of some potential, long-term potentially savings or just management of the facilities that we could have that could improve the longevity of the facilities as well as the assets in them.
Yes.
I think it's a good idea, but can I take the liberty of asking this to be delayed in our agenda? Because I'd like to hear from our consultants, Mike as an example, of what services they are going to be providing under their contract, which I think could be redundant in this proposal. But that's why I'd like to hear his point If he could get into that a little bit, I think he's on the agenda for water and wastewater down the lines.
So we're asking to move this agenda item further down before we vote on it.
Yes, okay.
Okay, is that, do I need a motion in order to move it down, or are we good to just skip it right now?
Okay with me.
Oh, would you like to speak?
No, I think she
We're
said
good?
okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
as long,
that sounds fine.
okay, that sounds good. All right, we'll move on to agenda item number 10, discussion and possible action on the award of the drinking water treatment facility project.
So, over the last couple of weeks, I've been sending out quite a bit of information. I've been working with Donahue on some memos and some outlining of these projects, and then based on that, and based on the review of the bids, which on the drinking water facility were favorable to the city, there are some recommendations in here, and I'd like to hear the commission's thoughts on, proposals moving forward, and if they have any specific questions. We have Donahue here. The low bid contractor is also here for the drinking water facility, so.
Do you like a presentation now, or would we like a motion first?
How do you, I guess, my memo up front, just to be clear, is to move forward with this project in full with all the ad alternates. Our original budget for this project was $40,900,000. That would increase the budget to $43,800,000. So just, as in a general summary, that's the impact in general for the drinking water treatment facility on recommendation.
And that translates to $1 per quarter on the rates?
That's correct.
20 per quarter to 21 per quarter? That's an increase, that's not the current rate.
That is correct. That is the increase.
Well, I'll move to proceed so that we can have our presentation.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, let's have this discussion. We'd like a presentation by Donahue. Is that right?
Yeah, do you want to talk on this a little bit?
Thank you.
Mike, about your memo?
Yeah, you bet. Mike Gerbitz with Donahue. Good afternoon, everybody. I don't have a copy of that memo in front of me, but I think what, I can talk to it, certainly. So we'll also look at this again. There's another agenda item where we'll talk about the wastewater project. And thank you. We'll talk about the wastewater project, and we'll look at rates for both. Let's face it, the families that are paying for these projects pay for water and wastewater in the same bill, and I think it's important to look at those things together. But as we looked at, the memo looks at the range that we established for our estimate. We think that that's an appropriate way. We'll look at that again on the wastewater project. An appropriate way to look at, for a large project like this, you look at a range. And because what happens on bid day depends on many, many factors outside of anybody's control. But on this particular project, the base bid for the project was well below our estimate. In addition, so the base bid plus all the alternates for the drinking water project was below the project budget that was established. And it was below our estimate. We included in the project an ad alternate. The city needs an administration building, a shop building. And the city asked if we could add that as an alternate item. We did, to see what the benefit of economies of scale would be, to see if the bidding climate was favorable. It might be possible that the administration building would fit within the budget. It might be possible that the administration building doesn't fit within the budget, but was very close. And I think that's what we see here. So we kind of see it the same way staff sees it. That's the administration building, shop building is a need that the city has, and it is unlikely to ever be cheaper than it would right now as part of this project because of the economies of scale. If that project was done separately, we would expect it to cost more. The administration building itself was also below our estimate. So given the cost of money today, the financing rates, and all those other factors that I talked about, We see it the same way staff sees it. We would recommend you move forward with with the base bid and all the alternates, including the administration shop building.
What is an operations and maintenance building?
I'll let Scott answer that.
What is that? Because this came out of the blue as far as I was concerned, never been discussed before that I recall.
The operations admin building would be our current meter shop. Right now, the way we're set up, the water plant is at 1801 and the meter shop is
Yeah.
at 1701.
Yes, I know that.
They would be moving both at the same site. The original thought, when we discussed that, when we started the facility plan, that eventually both would be there. We just didn't know if the funding would be available to have both of them moving there at the
Okay.
same time.
All right.
It just so happens to be working out right now.
So would this building be devoted just to water?
It would be in its current capacity, yes.
Just as the meter shop is now?
Well, right now, we're kind of split. We have 1.5 offices at our distribution shop, and we have one office in the plant. This would centralize our administration staff and operations for 99% of the staff. There would be minimal staffing at the plant, which would be right next door, for a plant operator and techs. They could go back and forth.
So it'd be two buildings?
Two buildings.
Okay.
Code was inhibitive to having one building house the whole thing. It's less expensive to have an office and shop area attached or separated than it would be to have it attached to the plant.
Okay.
Yeah. Gene?
I think it makes sense to consolidate where the staff are. I can see Scott running back and forth if he had can maintain the meter shop at its current location and move the water treatment plant. So I see it as a positive from that standpoint. In relation to the agenda item number 9, and I'm not sure, Mike, you're aware of that, but anyway, it speaks to reviewing the plans and specs. Well, that obviously is not possible, but I'd like to hear, because where we are with bidding it, that's the only rationale, and where we are with the safe drinking water revolving fund, how important it is for us to move forward with that.
Yeah.
But with regard to some of the other elements that were noted, such as efficiencies of operation and making sure that, it doesn't speak to training, but I think, is training part of the element of the things that we're going to see coming forth as we build these facilities?
Yep. So agenda item number 9 is at the Clark Dietz
Yes.
asset management thing.
Yes.
I'd like to speak to that. I do think that is a good project, and it's consistent with some of the things that we talked about during design. Now is the time, both facilities don't really have a well-developed, certainly not a modern, Scott, you correct me if you see it differently, but not a modern asset management system where all those different pieces of equipment are entered in and a lot of data is collected, operations and maintenance-related data is collected. A lot of data is collected and stored for asset management purposes and good decision-making. So I think asset management was viewed as something that really should happen. Now is the time to do it with these two major projects at both utilities. Now is the time to implement an asset management system. You'll have all new equipment. You'll be receiving new tag numbers. The types of information that goes into an asset management system you're going to be getting during construction, so it's the perfect time to put a system like that in place. Being a cost-effective utility today, it requires you first and foremost are a good data manager. And so the asset management component of that is making certain you've got good data and you can make good fact-based decisions on how to best spend your money. That's the asset management part. The optimization part, Jim, you're absolutely right. There's going to be training, a considerable amount of training, and that's in the construction services agreement for both projects. There will be commissioning assistance, and we will be optimizing the system at the time it's commissioned. We'll be working with staff to do that. But I looked briefly at what's there. There are some things that would be outside that commissioning, typical commissioning services. And that'd be bringing in a vendor to look at all the different chemical cocktails of polymer at the wastewater plant or some other polymers or chemicals at the water plant. And I think this is maybe a component of this is probably outside the scope of that commissioning and training services. We were never intending to define, out of all the different polymers, for instance, that are out there, what's the most optimal polymer. Bench testing, a lot of chemical testing was done during design, before design. Pilot testing was done before design. But that is almost kind of a thing that should be done somewhat continuously. As costs change, the economics change over time. And I think that agenda item number 9 is going to help with that. And then finally, there's the commissioning part and getting these facilities up and running. But once you have the asset management system in place, you can, and you're getting all that data, you've got an opportunity to look at amp draws and kilowatt hours kind of on a longer term than the commissioning. The commissioning will end at some point, and you're going to be running these facilities for generations, and I think this looks more at the longer term operation.
Thank you, Mike. I guess I do have one question about the asset management. Is it typically an engineering folks do that, or should we be working through an accountant? Or should that be more of an accountant process?
A lot of times it's an engineering firm, but in my experience, it's a highly technical thing. You're getting a tremendous amount of engineering operations related information, and you have to put that in your asset management software, make sure the inputs and the outputs, the I/O from the SCADA system are going to the right place, and integrating that with the SCADA system. So in my experience, it has been an engineering type firm, a technical firm that does that type of work.
I might have a couple other questions, but I guess what I take from it is that it might be a little premature, and maybe staff should be working on a proposal, but should be reflective of that this seemed like a pretty broad-based approach and that out of defense to them. I mean, that's kind of what we were trying to get at that point. But maybe you certainly can't do performance evaluation of polymers until the plant is built. So
Yeah.
that needs to follow sometime after construction and it's in operation.
I think it's a really important project. The timing is, that's up to the city, but let's face it, you're really going to be in a position to do that further down line and during construction. So there isn't an imminent need to move on it today, but it's an important project.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Is there further discussion? We're discussing kind of 2 items simultaneously here. So I want to just make a note that the motion that we have is awarding the drinking water treatment facility project. So is there any more discussion on that? Is there anything?
Just a question, so this would go back to the council for final approval, this number?
The borrowing would, right? Yeah.
Correct. So how the loan is set up for the Safe Drinking Water Program is that right now, the PSC is finalizing the rates.
Right.
Once that's finalized, the Department of Administration will do their due diligence, which basically allows us to borrow that money. And then there's a financial assistance agreement, what they call an FAA or a FOD, that will go to the city council on June 9th
Okay.
for approval, which would actually allow the borrowing.
Is it possible that the PSC would recommend a rate that's lower than the one we're anticipating?
I suppose anything's possible, but they haven't indicated
Okay.
anything like that. The public hearing is on Tuesday, and then they said it would probably be about 6 to 10 days, the Andrew Fisher that I was talking to, that they will finalize the rate. So there is a potential, I guess, that it
Okay.
could be changed.
Is there further discussion on this topic? Is everyone prepared to vote? All right, all those in favor of awarding the drinking water treatment facility project can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes unanimously. Are we prepared to move back to number 9, or do you want to move forward to the wastewater treatment?
I'd like to do the wastewater.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to item number 11, discussion and possible action on the award of the wastewater treatment facility project. Now that bid opening happened on April 21st. I will pass that over to you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so this was very recent, and there's been a lot of work that's been going on for the last 36 hours. And again, we have Donahue here who's going to walk you through the memorandum that came out today, kind of walking through what they have done. Myron Construction, the low bidder, is here as well. It's not really the intent here today to make a final decision, but I think what we need to do is focus on how we want to move forward, with doing due diligence, reviewing the bids, supporting, working with our low bidder, trying to, move those numbers down as much as possible and have them work with their subs to do that as well, to see if we can't get this in a measurable project for the city. But if you're okay, Mayor, maybe Mike can walk through the.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Mike Gerbitz again with Donahue. Yeah, the bid opening was, I think, just a mere 36 hours ago. So we haven't done all the due diligence, and as Eric said, I think one of the things that we want to decide is what are our next steps here. To help with that decision, I did put together a brief memo that kind of outlines those bids and also looks at the project cost. And to make sure everybody is following along here, I thought I'd just take a minute and just walk through it very briefly, because you guys have only had it for a couple of hours. So maybe the place to start is on page 1 in figure 1. And please stop me at any time and ask any questions. I'll try and go through this briefly, succinctly, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you have. I'm sure Myron would be happy to answer questions as well. So if we look at figure 1, this is just a reminder to everyone how the project will be funded. The wastewater project will be funded with the Clean Water Fund Loan Program. The sister program to that is a Safe Drinking Water Program. That'll be funding the drinking water project. And I just think it might be relevant to consider the fact that the cost of money is very low from a historical standpoint. The current rate for a 20-year loan is 1.76%. And the current rate for a 30-year loan is 1.87%. A couple years ago, we wouldn't have even been talking about a 30-year loan. And up to this point, we really hadn't talked about it on the drinking water project. We had talked about it on the wastewater project starting back in 2019. Nobody has used in Wisconsin a 30-year term on a treatment project to date. But the statutes were there, and frankly, it was as part of this project, we were working closely with the department, trying to encourage them to use a 30-year term. If you look at how long it's been since some of these treatment facilities have been upgraded, there's perfect evidence that these have a 30-year life to them. And in the day and age that we're in and the increasing cost of these systems, it seemed to make an awful lot of sense. The department, through a lot of collaboration, has now agreed that both drinking water and wastewater projects are eligible for a 30-year loan. If we go to page 2, here we're looking at the project budget, and we provide just a very simple breakdown of that budget in table 1. So in early 2019, we started to talk about the wastewater project, and we established a budget. And that budget was $80 million. And we kind of work into the construction budget on this particular table. We show some different line items for things that would be Clean Water Fund eligible. Just very briefly, the city wants to buy some of the equipment that'll be at the wastewater treatment plant, the computer equipment, LCDs, computers, and things like that. That's the $50,000 allowances for that. As you can see, we kind of foreshadowed the asset management issue. There's a line item here of $50,000 for asset management software. In the water plant budget, there's also a $50,000 allocation, thinking that that platform would be shared between the two utilities. And then there's engineering, there's the applications engineering, that's the programming of the control system. There's planning, design, engineering. And then there's principal forgiveness. There's some good news here. This year, you guys are eligible for $1.75 million in principal forgiveness. That's effectively a grant. Okay? You're eligible for that this year. Your eligibility for that expires June 30th, and then you'd have to get, back in the process for the subsequent funding year. Starting at 80 million and subtracting off these different line items, we arrive at what we called the construction budget, roughly $71 million, okay? If we go to Table 2, there we present the results from the bid opening. The first line of numbers is the base bid. The column labeled estimate min, that's estimate minimum, that was kind of the bottom of our range. Estimate maximum, that was the top of our range. The next line over is Myron's base bid, 74.2 million, and the next line over, or next column over, is 76 million by C.D. Smith. So that top line, our estimate, Myron's bid, and C.D. Smith's bid. Below that first line are a number of alternates, and this really wasn't the intent. This was put together quickly. The thinking was the decision on alternates would be made working closely with staff, talking closer to Myron and better understanding those, but we just wanted to portray them here or list them here. There's 12 different alternates. That was to give you some bid day flexibility. All these things would be good. Some are more important than others. One of the alternates between 8, 9, 10, and 11 are essential. They are required to meet the impending low-level phosphorus limit. We put these in as alternates to get competitive bidding between two very different manufacturers, very different systems. So the essential project, or what we call the minimum project, would be the base bid, plus one of the alternates between 8, 9, 10, and 11. 8 is the lowest cost, so that one's highlighted, that would be the minimum project, the base plus alternate 8. Another thing that's not reflected here, these are the bid costs in this table. Our bid form also allows or considers the cost of alternative manufacturers. In some instances, there's a preference for one versus another, for whatever reason. But that doesn't mean it's the only manufacturer that could be used. It's not part of the base bid, but it is on the bid form. If the city were to take those various deductions, and we don't see any that are really problematic, we haven't had an opportunity to review it with staff yet, but the collection of those different alternative manufacturers, in our mind, we wouldn't list them if they weren't a feasible alternative manufacturer, but the product of all of those deductions is $690,000. That's something that there'll be further discussion about, I'm sure. So I guess this is the time to maybe say that the Myron base bid was slightly above our range, and it exceeded the budget. So we were disappointed, frankly somewhat surprised. We're not used to seeing the bid on a project of this size come in on the top end of the range. On projects of this size, our results, not always, but on average, they tend to be more like they were on the water project, the drinking water project.
Were there only 2 bidders, Mike?
There were 2 bidders, yep, 2 general contractors. What I do want to point out, and we'll see this in a little bit, the budget is shown in Table 1 as $71 million. Typically, almost always, there's a direct correlation between that construction budget and the rates. And there is, but kind of retrospectively, there's a relationship between that budget and the rates. What you'll see is the way we looked at the rates during planning back in 18 and 19 was a bit unique. There wasn't certainty that all of the project would be eligible for 30 years. So we assumed that the department would allow some of the project to be covered at 30 and require the balance to be recovered at 20. That provides a very favorable situation for the ratepayers here in Wausau. We'll show in a minute here, I'll get to it, that the rates can be, if you award a larger project consistent with these bids, the rates to the typical residential user will be the same as the rates that we've been talking about since early 2019. We'll come back to that. On Table 3, we just take a quick look at our estimate relative to Myron's proposed alternates, or Myron's alternate bid items. And the point of this is just to show that the pricing from our perspective, if you look at where our estimate was and you look at where the alternates were from Myron, we view most of them as a good value. In most instances, I think in all but 2 cases, the alternates were less than our estimate for that work. It might be relevant to some future decision-making. There's a bunch of words in here. Maybe we could skip over those and we'll go to figure number 2, which kind of explains or introduces that figure. The purpose of figure 2 is kind of getting to the point that water customers are going to pay for wastewater and water on the same bill. This project and the drinking water project in the same bill. So how are they looking kind of in total together? The wastewater treatment facility column, we're showing in that figure, the tan box, that's our range of the estimate. The dark line is the budget, the construction budget, consistent with table 1. And the red diamond is the low bid for that minimum project, the minimum project. You can see it's right at the top of our range. This graph kind of illustrates, or this figure kind of illustrates why we think it's wise to look at these things in ranges. Because if you look at the drinking water project, again, we show our range. The red diamond is Myron's minimum project bid, and the black line is the budget. In this instance, the red diamond, of course, is below the budget, and it's below the range of estimates. So if the third column is the combined cost of those 2 projects, it's our combined estimate, it's the combined budget, it's the combined, the 2 minimum project bids. And there, the diamond is remarkably close to the budget of those 2 projects together, combined. And then finally, the last column. And I've never talked about this, but it just might be relevant perspective. The wastewater budget was really pulled together. We got costs from vendors and suppliers in March of 18. And the drinking water project, that budget was really established in December of 18. And time has marched on and the cost of the work has gone up. We've never really ENR indexed that, but what that final column on the right is showing is the costs that were established at the time they were established moved forward to today, to March of 2020. And that you're seeing the effects of inflation for construction work. And the final figure, figure 3. Here we look at the quarterly bill for the typical residential customer. The current rates for water and wastewater are shown. The legend shows what the colors mean. The darker blue represents the wastewater portion of the bill. The lighter blue represents the drinking water portion. Current rate for a typical the quarterly bill for a typical residential user is $108. What we've been talking about, and the estimated and presented, that's what's been talked about. This is entirely consistent with the last public information meeting. The $68 is the quarterly bill for a typical residential user for the drinking water. The $89 is for wastewater. That $89 is really consistent with what was talked about at the public information on March 5th, and it's consistent really with what was talked about in 19. Scenario A represents, make sure I get this right. Scenario A is a drinking water project that you just all took action on. It's the base plus all the alternates. The wastewater portion is the base bid plus alternate 8. Okay, it's the minimum project for wastewater with the current bids, with no adjustments to the bids. Wastewater is funded according to 30 years, is for 30 years, and drinking water is funded for 20 years in that scenario, okay? That's what we've been talking about really since the beginning, is water would be, we weren't certain the water folks were going to allow for 30 years. So scenario A is really what we've been talking about since the beginning. Scenario B is the drinking water project that you all took action on. It's the base plus all the alternates. However, that is financed for 30 years. And the wastewater project is the base plus the alternates that we think warrant a lot of consideration. Alternate 1, raw wastewater screening improvements. Alternate 4, some work done at the front end of the plant to the interceptor. We're going to be doing a lot of excavation work, bypass pumping. It seems like now's the time to do that work. Alternate 7 is fog receiving, so that Dave has a place to bring in grease or other industrial type waste and put it directly in the digester and make gas and keep it out of the liquid train. And alternate 9 is for 4 cloth media disc filters. Again, that's required. One of those alternatives is required to meet the low level phosphorus limit. So that project that's shown in scenario B, that larger wastewater project and the drinking water project that you just took action on, financed, both of them financed for 30 years. And what, I guess, now we get back to the point about that $71 million was the construction budget. It's an important number. That was our target. But what's unique about this is the way the rates were looked at since the beginning on the wastewater project puts you guys in a very unique position. There could be an increase to the wastewater project, and as you see here, the rates are consistent with the expectations that were set in 2019. And that might be relevant consideration on how you want to proceed from here. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks for enduring all that.
Where did alternate 8 go, Mike?
Alternate 8? Yeah, so
Is that in there? You're just assuming that that's in?
I think the city should think hard about 9 versus 8. I put 9 in instead of 8
Oh,
because
all right.
you've got better redundancy and capacity.
All right, yes, I
Yep.
see that now.
Yep.
Commissioner Jean.
There's another couple points. We probably should have discussed it under the water. It might be more important, but the rates under the state revolving fund as compared to going out on a revenue,
Yeah.
is it nearly 1% or thereabouts? And what does that transfer to annual dollars of debt service?
Yeah, thanks, Jim. I have a memo here. We looked at that in some other material that I sent you guys. If you lost your eligibility for the safe drinking water, and you guys are right at the limit, if you don't move and take action in early May, you guys will lose the funding that you're eligible for.
And that's the drinking water?
That's the drinking water,
Okay.
100%. The deadline for wastewater is June 30th. I'm trying to answer your question, Jim. I just got to get the right one. On the wastewater project, if you had to go sell bonds on the order of like 3.5%, it'd cost another $1 million a year in revenue. And on the drinking water, as I recall, it was in the vicinity of $500,000 more at
Or
a
500.
typical municipal bond rate. Yep.
Question, Joe and I had this discussion earlier, Mike, but the Safe Drinking Water Fund and the revolving loan fund, those are protected? Those are dollars in hand the state has? We're not going to see any erosion because of the COVID pandemic?
So we wouldn't expect that. 6 weeks ago, the interest rate was 1.65,
Yeah.
and then the stay-at-home order or
Yeah.
work
So
from home.
it's up a little
It
bit.
went up a little bit. And it was uncharacteristic that they usually do it every quarter. They did it midstream and increased it slightly.
But the money's there.
The money's there. Yeah, that's one thing I think that's important for everybody to know. An awful lot's been accomplished. The table is set for both of these projects. The money's there on the drinking water side. A lot of people said it couldn't be done in the time that we did it. All the things that have been worked through with PSC, DOA, funding's there, DNR approval's there, building approvals are there, table's set on water. On the wastewater side, DNR approval's there, Clean Water Fund has been allocated. There's nothing standing in the way of the city if the city wants to move forward. With the funding, the financing, assuming PSC goes fine, there's nothing standing in the way if the city wants to advance forward.
for Mike or Eric.
Go ahead.
I just need a clarification, and it's probably as simple as it gets, but maybe not. From my vantage point, we have done a great deal of work, and we've stood in line to get everything in order and then to have the funding come through. If we don't move on these, am I right that we lose our place in line for funding?
That's where the deadline comes in, right? The May deadline for drinking water and the June deadline for wastewater.
Yep. You've got $500,000 of principal forgiveness grant money on the water side. The interest rate is locked, the money's there. You have to go back in line. You run the risk of Waukesha has a very big project coming, two big projects. You run the risk that somebody else is competing for this money, they get rescored, and they jump ahead of you. That won't happen between now and June 30th.
Thank you.
So,
My additional concern, if I might just ask one more,
Sure, go ahead.
or at least make a comment, and this is for everybody or anyone. My big concern, and I've talked about this in previous meetings, is how this information is portrayed by the media. And I'm not going to single anyone out, any entity out. And as we have talked about in the past, between our engineers and our own department, everything has been wide open, numerous meetings, crystal clear to all of us. But I think under the circumstances, not only COVID-19, but just the amount and what might be portrayed in the media, I just think we need to be crystal clear in what we're saying and encourage media to be crystal clear in what they're saying.
Okay, thank you. Jean?
So in this particular case, are we in a position to fully award, or do you want us to give you a preliminary approval to proceed to do whatever value engineering to work on the number, even to make the number less than it is, or the cost less?
Yeah, I'll answer that again. We have Myron here, and I'd love to have Dave come up. I really appreciate you being here, Dave. From a staff perspective, I don't feel that it's in our best interest to rebid this project. I feel like in the bidding environment that we're in, and just with the preliminary review that Donahue has done and the work with Myron over the last 36 hours, the majority of the costs have come in, close, and we feel that the costs are reasonable. But I think through due diligence and some value engineering, working directly with Myron, we might be able to have some cost advantages here if they're willing to work with us as well. So that's what I would propose. I guess if the commission's comfortable with moving forward with an award on that based on any due diligence moving forward with Myron, that would be fine. If they would like to have us do that directly and come back with a final number prior to the award, we're more than willing to do that as well.
I guess, just speaking from my perspective, we do have a new council, so when we're talking about borrowing, and if we're awarding something right now without that number, you might face some political opposition and some problems, and I think it's probably better to at least delay some of this than to have it denied, just throwing it out there. Is there any discussion?
Well, could we preliminarily approve it, subject to review at the next commission
Of
meeting?
this body?
Of this body, yes. So in other words, we're not fully ratifying that, but at least we're working with Myron and our consultant, and I've heard enough whispering that rebidding this would be foolish. So I think we need to move forward, but I'll word whatever you want me to word this so that it doesn't create the political concern of the council. But I think we need to give people some sense that we are going to work in that direction. I don't know how to say that.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, just for whatever it's worth, I do think that could be viewed as an important step. Right now, maybe it's important to decide we're going to rebid it, or we're going to do some more due diligence and we're going to work with our low bidder. I think that because June 30th is fast approaching. And if you feel it's worth the time and energy to work with Myron and do some value engineering and looking for opportunities to do better than we hear, I think it's an important step and commitment to your low bidder to invest some time and energy to do that.
Well, I'll make that into form of a motion, and that it would be returned back to us for,
So I guess the intention of your motion is to say we'd like to, we have the intention to work with the lowest bidder, but we'd like some value engineering before we actually approve it. Correct. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jim. Any more discussion? Yes, I would love to.
Oh, yeah.
Is it Myron? Yes.
Good afternoon. I'm Dave Voss. I'm president and owner of Myron Construction. I want to say hi to Joe. Joe and I worked together on the last project many, many years ago at the wastewater plant. It's a very, very difficult decision, Commission, I understand. There's big dollars involved. Please understand, and I'm going to try to just relay facts. Anytime you have a major water, wastewater plant in the state of Wisconsin, okay, there's always two bidders, C.D. Smith, Myron Construction. We do 98%, I would say, of all that type of work in the state. We clobber each other every day, okay? When this job came up, we both wanted it really, really bad, okay? We worked hard. We assembled a great team. I'm sure they did the same thing. We went out and tried to find our successes of where we were going to be low. Many, many, many weeks were spent on putting this bid together, okay? I think we have a terrific number. Now, Mike did his job as soon as the bids came, went in and were open. Mike called, and obviously, distressed as an engineer. But I want to tell you what we did as a company. As a company, we turned over our entire recap to Donahue and Associates, including our markup and everything, and said, we want to work with you. It's a big job. We have a lot, obviously, of time and energy invested already. We'd like to make it work for the city of Wausau and for you. To everybody's point, we've done a lot of work in the last 36 hours. I think we've identified where the problem is, okay? And we're working on that together. So it isn't that, it's just more. We know exactly where it is, okay? To I think Mike's comment, should it be rebid? I can tell you emphatically that Myron would step back and not bid it, okay? So you have to think about that also, okay? In the last 3 to 4 years, there hasn't been a lot of water and wastewater work out there, big work. This year, it's a floodgate. It is a floodgate. I can tell you, help me, Jason, I believe there's 5 projects over $250 million total. A ton of work. The minute that we find out that this one's going to go bye-bye, if it would, we're going to go on to the next one, okay? We have to. We have 1,600 employees, families that I have to feed every day. That's my job, all right? I'm very proud to tell you we have an office in Wausau. We're a Wausau company, okay? We have over 350 people in the greater Wausau area that work and live here every day, okay? Wausau people are going to build your wastewater plant and your water plant if Myron Construction is awarded the job. We will work to the end of the earth for Donahue. They did a great job in the plans, by the way. Okay, and I ask my estimators that because I go into estimating every day and I'm there putting large projects together. My first question to the estimators, how's the plan? I get a lot of it's a piece of junk, believe me. This time this was a good plan, very, very well thought out, okay? That's exciting for me. That makes me even get more competitive. I think you have a great number. Can we bring it down? We certainly can. We've already identified areas that we can do that in, okay? We'll work with you. Wausau's our home. We understand that. We're going to work very, very hard, should you so desire us to do that. Thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
I met Mr. Voss on the last project, and he'll admit that we had our share of issues at that time. We had a pentachlorophenol trying to migrate to our treatment plant with the dewatering, And then we had a tank that at the bottom decided to give out. So, but as I seen you, Mr. Voss, and I appreciate your interest in our projects.
I just want to give some house cleaning. Our WebEx, people who are joining us by phone, you might get kicked off at 10 after the hour. So either, can you call back in? Will that work? Oh, okay, and I guess you won't be, okay. So Commissioner Miller will have to call you back if that happens. Thank you.
Sounds like a
Okay,
hint to wrap
thank
it up. Thank you, Mr. Voss, for that. And I do want another housekeeping matter. I think it's really important that we be very clear on what we're talking about. What we're talking about is looking at value engineering and options of reducing the construction costs. That's standard operating procedure for us. If a contractor has a way to save some money and accomplish the same thing, we're interested in that. We want to talk about that, and we want to do that. And we regularly do that on projects. I think it's important that the commission make it clear what we're not talking about is giving them a chance to submit another bid. We're talking about doing something here that we would do with C.D. Smith or some other contractor. This will not be, they won't be submitting a new bid to you guys. They can't do that. You can help me out here. They can't give you a new bid. What we can do is come to some understanding on where some money could be saved, and that would be done by change order. It could be done by change order number one. It could be done by change order number one at the same time you approve the agreement, but it's very important we don't give anyone the impression that we're giving somebody another opportunity to submit a bid. I just wanted to clear that up.
Joe, what was your motion?
The motion was to indicate that we anticipate accepting this bid. However, we would like to revisit this in the next meeting with those kind of value engineering options, savings.
Call for the question. Call for the question.
Okay, is there any opposition to calling the question right now? All right, I guess we're ready to vote. All those in favor can signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
That motion passes unanimously. Now, do we need to come back and revisit the third party?
Yes,
Okay.
let's do that.
All right, let's come back. We're revisiting item 9, discussion and possible action on hiring a third-party consultant firm to complete an asset management and operation assessment of the proposed drinking water treatment facility and wastewater treatment facility to allow for enhancing system operations and data usage. All right.
I'd like to comment on that. I think this is best practice, and it is something I would like to do if we can afford it. I don't see any numbers associated with the material that we have today, and I don't see any examples of work that Clark Dietz has done in this arena. I'd like to see both of those before I'm comfortable with going ahead.
I think, Jim, maybe I was unclear, but this is really just to help us understand what could be done.
Right.
Our intent would be to do an RFP,
Okay.
with the scope of services and
All
have
right.
firms provide us, maybe what we would need, so we would work with them.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Well, then I don't, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I think some things are, it looks like the asset management thing needs to be addressed, not instantly, but at least that could be ongoing in conjunction with construction. However, some of the other items might come after construction well after startup. But I would give staff the direction to go ahead and start working on this, and as they get things together, bring it back for our consideration.
Is that a motion?
I'll make that as a motion.
Okay.
I'd like to amend that.
I need a second first, I think. Second by Herbst.
Thank you.
All right, we're talking about amendment now.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that it has to be in a minute, but the 2 points I made earlier, if we do an RFP, I'd like to see those who are interested give us some examples of work they've done. And
Okay.
obviously,
That'll be part of the-
obviously their cost would be part of their proposal.
I think that can be part of our request to staff, and we don't necessarily need to amend.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this item?
Excuse me?
Yes, go ahead.
I'll call this pride of operators. I look to our staff, just like when I was, am I on?
Yes,
sorry. Okay.
The door wants to speak, I think.
Okay. I'll give you an example. And I don't remember the name of the firm in Milwaukee that was privately, the Milwaukee Met was privately taken over for O&M. That was back in mid-'70s, I'm guessing, maybe a little later. When we did the upgrade of our wastewater treatment plant with the Myron folks back in '89, '90, I knew that if we didn't take action to operate that facility as efficiently as we possibly could, and I instilled that in the staff, and we automated both, it turns out we automated the wastewater plant, we automated the water plant. We went from a total staffing, at one point in time, we were well over 50, we were in the mid-35. If you can do the math yourself on 20 employees, that's why I call pride of our staff. And I think some of this stuff, some of the things that maybe we need to have third party, I would like to have our staff have the opportunity to operate that plant efficiently, and so that we're chasing a lot of dollars here. I'm okay with doing that if we need to do it, but I've looked to our staff to give leadership in this too. Okay?
Okay. Is there any more discussion? Are we prepared to vote? All right, all of those in favor of directing staff to look into the third-party consulting firms to complete an asset management operation assessment of the proposed facilities to allow for enhancing system operations, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? This motion passes unanimously. Thank you. I guess we're moving on to item number 12, and that's discussion on the next proposed commission meeting.
I obviously didn't know exactly how this was going to go. We do have a regularly scheduled meeting for May 5th, and I would think that we would want to keep that. We will bring the wastewater costs back, and great, perfect. And if we have anything on the lead service line, and we'll do it at that time. Otherwise, if we're not ready yet, Jim, we'll bring it back at the following meeting.
Okay.
As soon as we can.
And also the landscaping at Reservoir Park.
I will just note that I think the motion that we made said that we want to see it back, so even if you have a delay, we might need to talk about it anyway.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
Understand.
Is there any, do I have a motion to adjourn? I guess I don't even need it, but I'll take it. Motion by Herbst.
I second.
Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, those opposed?
Aye.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.